The story of Ray Rice had a promising start and a feel-good story until it came to an unexpected crashing halt. Rice is remembered for one split moment where he lost his composure and it ultimately cost him his career. But let's look at the big picture. Not just the bad parts at the end, but his childhood, going to Rutgers, and being one of the best running backs in the NFL for about a 4-year span. Rice was born and raised in an apartment in New Rochelle, New York, and unfortunately lost his father at the age of 1 during a drive-by shooting. Ray was considered the man of the house at a young age and started contributing income by the age of 8 years old. He used to come home from work and give his money straight to his mother, and according to her, it made him proud. To make this already sad story even worse, it was revealed in court that Ray's father was not the shooter's target. He just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Sometimes you wonder what it would be like to have your real dad, Ray said. Just for a walk in the park or just recapping our lives. That's the part that makes me think. And to make this worse, Ray had an older cousin named Sean Rice Nichols. Sean already had 2 girls of his own and was an aspiring rapper, but he also became a father figure in Ray Rice's life. But tragically, on St. Patrick's Day in 1998, an out-of-control vehicle took out Sean and his fiancée, and both tragically passed away. It was another instance of just wrong place, wrong time. And before Ray was barely even a teenager, he already lost 2 father figures in his life, and one was his biological father. Despite all the losses and hardship at a young age, Rice became even more determined to make a name for himself. In the 11th grade, he promised his mother he was going to go to the league so she wouldn't have to work anymore. Rice was a football and basketball player in high school, but due to his height, he chose the path of football by committing to Rutgers University in 2005. Rice quickly became a football legend in the New Jersey area and helped revive a Rutgers football program that had not been relevant since the early 90s. In Rice's sophomore season, Rutgers was ranked 12th in the nation and tied a school record with 11 wins. In that 2006 season, Rice rushed for nearly 1,800 yards and 20 total touchdowns. He topped that off by rushing over 2,000 yards in his final junior season, along with 25 total touchdowns. In 3 collegiate seasons, Rice accumulated over 4,900 rushing yards, 50 total touchdowns, broke numerous school records, and finished 7th in Heisman voting in 2006. In the 2008 NFL Draft, Rice was taken in the 2nd round, 55th overall by the Baltimore Ravens. And shockingly, he was the 7th running back taken in that draft, although there were some great names including Darren McFadden, Chris Johnson, and Matt Forte. Rice signed his 4-year, $2.8 million deal, and his promise to his mother was fulfilled. Now technically, she didn't have to work anymore, but Ray's mother remained teaching middle school during this time. Rice finished with the 3rd most carries on the Ravens during his 2008 rookie season, trailing Willis McGahee and LaRon McClain. Rice, however, was the most efficient of the 3 backs, averaging 4.2 yards per attempt and had the most receiving yards out of that bunch. The Ravens with rookie Joe Flacco did make it to the AFC Championship game, but Rice only received 1 carry in 3 playoff games. But in his 2nd season in 2009, Rice was named the starting running back in training camp, and that's where his NFL career took off. Rice would string together 4 straight years from 2009 to 2012, where he was arguably one of the best backs in the league. He was now in the conversation with MJD, Adrian Peterson, Arian Foster, Chris Johnson, and a few others. In 2009, he opened up with a 100-yard game on the ground and scored his first NFL touchdown in Week 3 versus Cleveland. Rice helped the Ravens go 9-7 and clinch back-to-back playoff spots since arriving to Baltimore. He finished 2009's regular season with over 1,300 rushing yards, over 700 receiving yards, and 8 total touchdowns. But arguably, his best moment in that season came in the playoffs. On the Ravens' first offensive play of the game, Rice ripped off a 83-yard touchdown run at New England, which kickstarted a monster day for Rice in his first playoff game as the lead back. He finished a wild-card victory with 159 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, and his 83-yard touchdown run was the 2nd longest run in NFL playoff history at that time. Unfortunately though, a week later, the Ravens only scored 3 offensive points in their divisional round loss versus the Colts. Rice had over 120 scrimmage yards, but the rest of the offense had a very tough time that day. The following 2010 season wasn't Rice's best season. He had his lowest yards per carry till that point, but still finished the year with very impressive counting stats. Although he only had 2 games over 100 rushing yards that year, Rice finished his 3rd year with over 1,200 rushing yards and added 63 receptions. In a Week 15 matchup at New Orleans, Rice had 223 yards from scrimmage along with 2 touchdowns. In 2010's playoffs, Rice scored a receiving touchdown in a blowout victory, but once again they came up short in the a divisional round as he was bottled up versus the Steelers defense, who held him to 2.6 yards per carry. 2011 was a contract year for Ray, and another big season would result in a massive contract extension. He started off the 2011 season going over 100 yards on the ground versus the Steelers, the same Steelers defense that only allowed one 100-yard rusher the entire season prior. In week 13 that year, Rice had a career-high 204 rushing yards versus the Browns. He finished the year on a heater, averaging 5.2 yards per carry in his final 7 games in the 2011 regular season. Baltimore went 6-1 during that stretch and got them to a 12-4 record by season's end. After a round 1 bye, the Ravens secured a spot in the AFC Championship game. This is remembered as the Billy Cundiff game, and the Ravens were so close to making it to the Super Bowl. Rice had a mediocre playoff performance in 2 games, but the Ravens had every opportunity to make it to the big game. Speaking of big, Ray Rice was in line for a big payday, but the two parties were not able to agree on a long-term deal. With contract talks looming, here's what Rice said about his upcoming free agency. "I'm not going to complain about the franchise tag, but I prefer the long term. That's what Baltimore, the city, the fans would love to know, that Ray Rice is going to be here not just for 1 year, but for many years to come." He had to quote-unquote settle for the tag, which paid him $7 million for that 1 year, not too bad for 2012 standards. 2012 overall was a magical season for Rice and the Ravens. In week 12, facing a 4th and 29, the famous play called
"Check down, hey diddle diddle, Ray Rice up the middle"
was created. With nothing open downfield, Joe Flacco decided to check down to his running back at the line of scrimmage, meaning that Rice had to pick up 29 yards on his own in order to keep the Ravens alive in that game. He miraculously avoided 7 or 8 Chargers defenders, and with help from an Anquan Boldin block, it turned out to be one of the most improbable plays you'll ever see on a football field. Baltimore would win that game in overtime, and you can argue without that play, the Ravens missed the playoffs and that magical season never happens. Baltimore finished 10-6 that year, but finished the year going 1-4 in their final 5 games. They were able to win their wildcard matchup at home versus the Colts, and then next week gave us a game to remember. Rice had 131 yards on 30 carries in this game, but it was the memorable ending that made this game unforgettable thanks to the Broncos' blunder in the secondary. In the AFC Championship game, Baltimore got their revenge on New England, who just beat them the season prior, and Rice scored the first touchdown of that game. Ray Rice and the Baltimore Ravens were on their way to Super Bowl 47. Unfortunately for Rice, nor he or his backfield mate Bernard Pierce had efficient games in the Super Bowl. But on the bright side, and most importantly, the Ravens held on to win in a nail-biter as San Francisco was storming back in the second half. The kid from New York who had faced so much adversity at a young age had done it. He made it to the NFL. He made enough money to set up his mother and his family for life. Was one of the best at his position in the sport, and now a Super Bowl champion. Rice was so well respected around the league at this point that he ranked 13th on the NFL Top 100 list. He may have been on top of the world at this point, but sadly this was probably the peak of his professional career. Before that downfall though, Rice re-signed to the Ravens on a 5-year, $35 million deal, including $15 million in guaranteed money. At this point, he was just turning 26, signed a brand new deal, and was still on a great team. But in 2013, we did not see the same Ray Rice that we were used to seeing. Battling a bad hip injury, Rice had by far the worst year of his career, averaging only 3.1 yards per carry in 15 games. Rice only had 1 game over 75 rushing yards, and it happened to be 131 yards versus the Browns. The Ravens as a team declined, I guess you can call it the Super Bowl hangover, missing the playoffs at 8-8, and Rice himself declined even more sadly. After the season, Rice admitted that he regrets playing through that hip injury. "I probably should have thought twice about it, but I'm glad I was able to push through the season and not have any surgical procedures. One thing I know my body needed was rest, and we didn't do what we wanted to do this year, but I'm positive that things are looking better for next year already." Now look at what he said closely. "I'm positive that things are going to look better for next year." Well, once again, he was technically right, but Ray Rice himself was not a part of it. In February 2014, it was announced that Rice was involved in an incident in Atlantic City where he reportedly struck his then fiancée in the face and knocked her unconscious. Less than 2 months after the incident, Rice married his fiancée, Janae Palmer, in late March. Ray and Janae were convinced by the Ravens to do a press conference, and in that conference, they did the best they could to make the blame seem 50-50 and take pressure off Ray Rice. There was even a tweet from the Ravens Twitter account, which has since been been delated, where Janae issued an apology for her actions during that time. On June 16th, Ray and Janae met with Roger Goodell. On July 28th, Ray received a standing ovation from Ravens fans at training camp. On August 28th, Roger Goodell announced that any future domestic violence incident will result in a minimum 6-game suspension. Goodell knew that 2 games was not enough for Ray Rice's actions. Then finally, on September 8th, 2014 is the day everything changed. TMZ released the elevator footage to the public, and within hours, due to the backlash from everyone, and I mean literally everyone, Rice's contract was terminated and released by the Ravens. He was also indefinitely suspended by the NFL. Rice was still able to keep $26.6 million of his contract he signed the offseason prior, but he would end up missing out on the rest of his possible future earnings. Even his jersey was taken off the shelves at the Ravens team store and just about everywhere else. But on November 28th, Rice was reinstated to the NFL after winning his appeal. Apparently, it was illegal for the NFL to suspend you twice for one action, and that's what they did to Ray. Well, hey, he was able to play in the NFL again, that's great. But would teams even touch him with a 10-foot pole at this point, after everyone, and I mean everyone, saw that video on the elevator? Rice was then 27 and definitely would have been able to help a team win, but that's if they would sign him. There were rumors of Rice going to New England, as one of their backs, Dion Lewis, tore his ACL the week prior. Josina Anderson tweeted that Ray would have been grateful and just wanted to play somewhere, but even Robert Kraft shut down this idea. Not only for his team, but the Patriots owner claimed that he'd be shocked if Ray Rice ever played in the NFL again. It was also reported that the Browns were giving Rice a real look due to his connection with some of the coaches on their staff, including head coach Mike Pettin, but that never came to fruition either. From a talent standpoint, it seemed like some coaches and even general managers were interested, but I'm sure ownership did not want to deal with the backlash. Even at 27, Rice was still better than some of the other veteran backs in the league, but due to the foreseeable backlash, he was just never signed. Fast forward to December of 2018, almost 4 years after the incident, and Rice admitted he was done with football. Rice summed up the outcome of his career pretty perfectly in a way that's bigger than football.
Somewhere down the line, everybody was saying, does he deserve a second chance for football and this, that, and the other. I actually got my second chance right here.
Oh. With your wife?
During my darkest moments, I used to ask myself, how could she even want to support me? But
a lot of people wondered that.
That's understandable. Mm-hmm. But I think what's misunderstood about us is that the friends we were before the incident.
Today, Ray Rice is still married to Janae. They have 2 kids, 2 dogs, and moved to Connecticut in 2016. Ray admitted that he would be in shambles and in a very dark place if that split decision in 2014 costed him losing Janae. He's grateful for his second chance with her, and he's done his best to not just make himself look better to the public, but really make himself a better person. After the incident, he attended therapy, he spoke out against domestic violence numerous times, volunteers for his former high school football team, and continues to be a good dad and husband. At his peak, Rice was arguably a top 5 back in the game, and like most at the running back position, his career was cut short, but for different reason. You can tell he's remorseful, and although he never played football again and will always have this negative image attached to him, I think he's done everything he could to make up for this mistake. Rice finished his NFL career with 6,180 rushing yards, 43 total touchdowns, over 3,000 receiving yards, and of course was a key contributor to their Super Bowl championship in 2012. That'll do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like and subscribe if you did, and I'll talk to you guys next time.